Hello, welcome back to How to D&D. Today is all about the complex combat mechanics. That's right, all the stuff we haven't covered, we're going to try to cover it today. Of course, we couldn't possibly cover everything because there are so many rules, but we will certainly give it a try. Certainly the stuff that you find in the combat section. We'll be covering that for sure. I'm going to be posting up a poll today. I apologise if my voice is a bit on the crackly side. It seems to be the norm for me, unfortunately. I'll be putting up a poll. I'll post that now. Feel free to ask questions in the chat. I will do a presentation. I'm just going to go over and check, make sure my head cam is working correctly, and then we are ready to fire on and get on with the show. So grab some food, some drink. Make sure you're comfortable. My suggestion to you is you probably want to try and grab yourself some dice. You're probably going to find yourself in a position where you will be using dice. So I would grab that if you can. And I'm going to more than likely present things a little bit differently than I did before. We'll see how we go. How's it going, Milton? How are you doing? Thank you very much. I appreciate the the compliments. Anyway. Let's get on with the business. So slideshow, Q&A, and then demonstration with maps, miniatures, and dice. Okay, that's what we're doing today. And I should be all ready to go now. Okay, oh yes, all right, here we go. Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Weller, and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons. Not Lego, not Batman, not superheroes, no, it's all about the Dungeons & Dragons 5e rules. This is the weekly program I run. This is Lesson 3, Complex Combat Mechanics. That's right, that's all the stuff we haven't covered before. Like, what is that going to be, Fred? Well, the overview is, we're going to cover the hide action in combat. Yes, the hide action in combat. What is a readied action in a battle? How does the grapple work in a fight? What makes the shove different from the grapple? Cover, there are 3 different types. We'll talk about them. We also have our death saving throws for the characters, and I have some miscellaneous recommendations. Now, if there's something here that you want me to cover that I haven't covered, don't fret. Okay, don't fret. Don't worry. I will explain everything as clearly as I possibly can. I will demonstrate as much as I can. I want you to participate, so please have some dice ready and be prepared to ask some questions and give some feedback. I like that. D&D Beyond has been purchased by Wizards of the Coast. You will find the basic game rules for Dungeons & Dragons 5e for free on D&D Beyond. There's also a PDF that you can download if you want to. So the first action that we're going to cover for today is the hide action. The hide action is used quite a lot by rogues, but not by everybody who is a rogue. The hide action requires that you use your main action so that your character or your monster or your NPC can be unseen from a foe or the enemy. You make a dexterity or stealth check, and you can only do this if you have something to hide in or hide behind. If you have something to hide in or hide behind, then you can make the stealth check. Now, there are exceptions to this, but I'm not going to go into them. Generally, that's how it works. Okay, so that's the hide action. Probably one of my worst favorite. Worst favorite? No, look, the ready to action is a pain. It's a very confusing rule, and I understand when people get confused about how to go about dealing with that. It requires you use your main action on your turn if you are a character. If you're a monster, you make it on your turn. And instead of it activating on your turn, it's going to activate on a reaction, which means the act is based on a stipulated trigger. So you have to state what the trigger is. You can't just say, I'm going to ready an action. You have to state what it is. So I'm going to swing my axe if the orc tries to attack me or my friends. Would be a trigger. And you're using your action, but it doesn't take place unless that trigger is activated. When that happens, then you make your reaction. Okay, that's part of your ready action. Okay, now you can ready an action, you can ready a move. Okay, you can also take your, if you have more than one action, you could potentially take an action And if you have another action that you can use, not your bonus action, but another action, say you're a fighter and you have action surge, then you can ready an action. So you can move before you actually take a readied action. So that's fine. You can also use your bonus action or movement before you take a readied action. You can ready any kind of action you like. There's a whole bunch of them. You can ready any type of action you like. You can also ready movement. So it's versatile. It's got lots of uses, but the intention is to use it on somebody else's turn, usually the Dungeon Master. So that's the readied action. Okay, grapple. This is when you want to grab somebody. Yes, you're into wrestling. Right, this is the one for you. This is a special melee attack, which means basically you do it at close quarters, and it stops a creature from moving. You're going to perform a contest, and that contest takes place between your strength or athletics check, okay? And you must succeed on the target creature's strength athletics check or dexterity acrobatics check to resist them being held. So if you put the grapple on, you get to use your strength or athletics check, but the target creature that you're trying to grapple gets to use either strength athletics or dexterity acrobatics. You must get greater than whatever they score. If you get equal to, nothing happens. If you get less than, it fails. Fairly simple. It's probably not a mechanic that will persist into the future, but that's how it works right now. The shove action, I like to sort of think of this as like doing judo. You're throwing people. This is a special melee attack done at close quarters. It allows you to either knock a creature prone or push a creature about 5 feet away. You're going to perform a contest exactly like the grapple, same process. So you make a strength athletics check to try to put your shove in place, and the target creature gets to resist that force that you're trying to push on them by using a strength athletics check or a dexterity acrobatics check. You must get greater than whatever they score. If you get equal to, okay, nothing happens. If you get less than, it fails. Simple as that. So those are the grapple and shove. And yes, you can replace one of your attacks with a shove or a grapple if you wanted to. The cover rules. There are many tables that don't use the cover rules at all. And if you don't feel bad. That's all right. You don't have to use them. A lot of games will go fine without having any cover rules whatsoever. Now, cover can make you more difficult to attack, so it's harder for an attack to hit you. It's harder for spells to affect your character or the monster. Half cover. This is when half of your body is covered, up to at least half of your body. You get a +2 bonus to your armor class when you have it, or a +2 bonus to your dexterity saving throw. It does not apply to any other saving throws, only the dexterity saving throw. If you have 3/4 cover, it means that 3/4 of your body is covered. This cover grants you a +5 bonus to your armor class and a +5 bonus to your dexterity saving throw. Now, what would be 3/4 cover? Well, 3/4 cover would be an arrow slit, maybe the battlements on a castle, if you're using that, and there's only just sort of like your head showing. Now, half cover, a good example of this is going to be somebody standing in front of you. Just one of your mates, the enemy, they would provide a half cover bonus, okay? Now, total cover is different to half cover and 3/4 cover. Total cover means the creature can't be targeted by an attack or a spell because you can't see them. So if you have total cover, it means you can't be seen. Now, there are area effect spells that can go around corners, and they can go around a wall if there's space to do so, and it still affect you. But generally, total cover means you can't be targeted by an attack or a spell. It's the best type of cover to have, and if you can use it, then use it. Okay, the death saving throw. I think I get the most questions about the death saving throw short of how do I use a short rest and my hit dice. Death saving throws. So this is ported over from 4E and it's now a 5e mechanic, which with a few changes, that is. Death saving throws are performed at the start of a character's turn. Now, they are not normally performed by a monster or an NPC unless the Dungeon Master deems that they should have a death saving throw. So this is usually only performed by the player characters. You only get to perform this death saving throw if you have reached 0 hit points and you're not instantly dead or dead. What it represents is that you are on 0 hit points, you are unconscious, and you are bleeding out. And this is when you will make a single D20 dice roll. So you roll a 20-sided dice to determine the result. So how do we figure out from our dice roll what's going to happen? Well, we don't normally add anything to that dice roll. You don't add any kind of modifiers usually. There are spells that can affect it, but they're very few and far between. And this is how it works. If you roll a 10 or higher, that counts as 1 success. Okay? 10 or higher, 1 success. If you roll a 9 or less, that counts as a failure. But there are some exceptions to this. If you roll a 1, this counts as 2 failures. So out of the rolling a 9 or less, if you roll a 1 on the 20-sided dice, instead of getting 1 failure, you get 2 failures. Okay? So that means from 9 through to 2, that's 1 failure. But a 1 gets you 2 failures. That means you're close towards being dead. If you roll a 20 on the 20-sided dice, you regain 1 hit point. You're now conscious and your eyes open up, if you want them to open up, that is. And you do this on the beginning of your turn, at the very start of your turn. So it means you can take your action, your bonus action, your movement, your interactions. You can do all that stuff. So we have to keep a record of how many failures we get and how many successes we get, because if we get 3 cumulative successful death saving throws, we are stable. We're still on 0 hit points, but we're not having to make any more death saving throws because we're stable, we're not dying. Okay, the character is stable. If we get 3 cumulative failures, that means the character's dead. Dead as a doorknob, dead, dead, dead. Do we have to get all of those successes and failures in a row? No. You simply add them up, and if you get 3 failures before you get 3 successes, then you're dead. If you get 3 successes before you get 3 failures, you're stable, or potentially, if you rolled a 20, you're on 1 hit point and conscious now. So that's how the death saving rules work. It's there primarily to try to give people something to do while they are lying on the ground doing very little, as they are bleeding out, so that they keep them in the fight. That's really the primary reason for the death saving throw. So my miscellaneous recommendations to you with regard to the complex combat mechanics of the game. And there are many, many more rules, of course. When unsure what to apply, my suggestion to you is you're either going to apply an ability check, a skill check, an attack roll, or a saving throw. And that will determine if whatever you're trying to do is going to work. So figure out which one is more appropriate for whatever the player's trying to do, whatever the monster's trying to do. Is it an ability check? Does it make more sense it's a skill check? Could it be an attack roll? Could it be a saving throw? Otherwise, fall back on the fact that whatever they try to do, does it make sense that no dice is rolled? Can you simply apply automatic success to whatever they're trying to do? Or could you apply automatic failure to whatever they're trying to do? If it makes sense. So if they're trying to do something that's outrageous, like, say, lasso the moon and pull it down to Earth, then you could say that fails. No need to dice roll. Now, if they are going to climb along a rope, a knotted rope, down an easy sort of embankment, well, it doesn't make sense that you need to roll any kind of dice to climb down the rope that's knotted. It's probably very easy to do. So automatic success, don't need to roll any dice. Now, would you be doing this in the middle of combat? Well, sometimes you will and sometimes you won't. As a general rule, we will probably be using a lot of dice mechanics in the middle of a battle because there are chances of failure, even if they are extremely small. But it will be up to you as a dungeon master and with negotiation with your players to determine how's the best way to make that work. And I'm hoping that this was useful to you. Every time I do these, I'm never too sure if I have said enough or not enough. Did I say too little? Did I say too much? But use the comment section. If you have any questions, put it there. If you have any feedback you would like to give, use the comment section again. That's what it's there for. I want to thank you for watching my video and my live stream. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Give me a second. I will transition over to my face. We'll go to chat. I will be demonstrating a lot of what I just spoke about today. For those of you who are like, what's the step door? Is he going to do some demonstration? Yes, I am. I absolutely will be. It's very much my intention to make sure that I keep a very demonstration heavy tutorial going rather than not have a heavy tutorial focus. So let's have a look at the chat. Let's have a look at a poll, and I'll just say hi to everybody, and then we'll move on to our questions. So I'm going to put, actually right now, to get you started, hashtag, so I don't miss it. Please be very specific about your question so it's not confusing. So you can't do shortenings because I won't understand. Hashtag question. You have plenty of time to ask me questions. We have a good hour and 40 minutes. So I'm going to be here for another hour and 40 minutes, basically. So you have plenty of time to type into the chat the question you have nice and clearly so I can communicate back to you what you want to know. Okay? All right, so let's go into here. Here's the poll I put in here. Do you argue with other people at the table about Dungeons & Dragons 5e rules? 13% out of 15 people said yes. 53% of people said no. So, having been at so many tables, I think maybe the 53% have forgotten, because I know it's happened to me. I've argued about rules. Might have been a long time ago, might have been recently, but people do it. It happens. It's human, okay? There is a point, of course, when nobody really cares. Now, just watching, okay. All right, so you basically, you're letting me know you're here, but you don't want to take part in the question, which is exactly why that is there in the first place. So thank you for responding. Okay, so let's get into our questions. Milton, what do you got here? Don't worry about the voice. Yeah, no, I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best. It should be all right. BK Dan, hello BK Dan. How are you doing, Dan? Now, how do you make a Batman character without the DM knowing? Okay, so that's actually a really good question, Milton. So let me answer that question. I'm going to stick with the face cam. So I'm going to answer your question, Milton. First things first. So how do you make a Batman character in Dungeons & Dragons 5e without the Dungeon Master knowing? Right there, stop. Stop, people. Don't do that. Do you know what that is? That's devious. That's secretive. And actually, that's not the right way to play. If you want your group and your relationship with your Dungeon Master to be garbage, that's a good way to do it. Now, if your Dungeon Master doesn't want you to make a Batman character and you want to make a Batman character, don't make a Batman character. So I'm not going to tell you how to make a Batman character for your game so that your Dungeon Master doesn't know, so you get what you want. When they're deliberate, and if they've said specifically, don't make a Batman character, do not do that. If you say, look, I want to make a character that's like Batman, and they say, I'm not happy with that idea, okay, just don't do it. You make a character that you want to play, but the Dungeon Master will allow at your table and will fit in with your group. This is why we have Session 0. You build your character together. So do not make Batman characters if they don't want it at the table. And any other type of character. You know, if you decide you want to make Superman, don't make Superman for a Dungeons & Dragons game if nobody wants a Superman-like character in the game. Do you know what I mean? So you should never be doing that. That's the worst thing you could conceivably do. So yes, no, no, no. Do not do that. This is not just my opinion. If you do that, you will wreck your group. Okay. Hang out in an alley. So now I imagine Milton's question was actually done in jest. For those of you who haven't figured it out, it was probably done in jest. But I'm answering it quite seriously. Do you know what I mean? Because I know some people would consider making a Batman character. There is a reason why Batman is part of the memes that I've put forward. Because I know fully well that people do try to make Batman characters in Dungeons & Dragons. And it's fine if everybody's all right with it. But if they're not, don't do that. Don't do that. Okay. Now, where are we? I'm just going to move my microphone just slightly over so I can see the question. I see some questions coming through now. We have Big Clue. Hello. Did I get in here in time for Fred's D&D Fight Club? Yes, we're going to do D&D Fight Club in a second. Don't you worry. Demonstration will be happening soon. But Warren has a question, and he's gone #question, so let's answer that. Can a player use minor illusion of a 5x5 crate to use as cover? Okay. So Warren, you already know the answer to that question, Warren. You already know that when you think about it and you look at it, right, it's unless the person who's cast minor illusion has revealed that it is an illusion, or whoever's looking at the illusion realizes it's a fake box or crate, they just assume that it's a crate, right? And look, Trent Monk has done a video on minor illusion, so have I. Minor illusion is one of those things where dungeon masters really struggle to get their head around what to do with it. This is what I would say to you. If somebody is using a crate and they're using it to making an attack, say a longbow attack or a short bow attack, and then ducking down behind the crate so they can't be seen at all, then they can't be targeted, can they? Because they don't know that the crate is an illusion. All right, so that's one thing. The next thing is, what if they're using the crate? No, I know, Warren, but let me finish, Warren. Let me finish, Warren, okay? Because you're the dungeon master, and we have to get to that point. The next thing, what about the crate where it's an illusion, it's 5x5, and they're using it as half cover or 3/4 cover? Are we now going to, it's an illusion, they can only see part of their body. Does that change the fact that they're going to be harder to hit? Does that change it? Now you, as a dungeon master, now the players are probably thinking, this is why I used the illusion in the first place. And I have, in the video I made, presented this as an option to dungeon masters and players. As dungeon masters and players, I provided it as an option. Could they use minor illusion to create a crate or a barrel and have increase their AC by +2 for half cover or by +5 for 3/4 cover? Now here's the thing. It's not a real obstacle, is it? It's not a real crate or barrel. No, it's not a real crate or barrel. So in your mind as a dungeon master, not as a player, as your player, you're thinking it can be done. In your mind, as you're using your imagination and you're thinking about it, what the player's wanting is to be able to get the +2, +5. As a dungeon master, you know that it's actually not a physical obstacle that will stop an incoming attack. So how do you adjudicate it? Well, there's a couple of ways you adjudicate it. You go with what the players are wanting in the first place and let them have the +2 or +5 to their armor class, or use it as total cover if they drop all the way down. Or you don't. And if you don't do it that way, you let them know that that's how you're going to roll it. And you say, in this case, I think it makes more sense that since you're trying to use pretend cover, although they can only see part of your body and you should be harder to hit, but that's not actually a true indication, they are targeting only part of you, I'm going to apply disadvantage to your attack roll. So you still, it's to the attack roll. So whatever attack roll that's targeting you, when you're using that minor illusion barrel or crate as cover, instead of getting a +2 bonus or a +5 bonus for 3/4 cover, I'm going to apply disadvantage to attack roll against you. So that's another way. Now, that kind of equates to the same as doing a +5 to your armor class, does it not? Yep. Or you say, well, yeah, but ultimately it's not true cover, is it? So, no, you won't get a +2 or a +5 cover bonus. That kind of breaks the player's idea of what to do with that. But your decision as a dungeon master, however you rule it, is up to you. You just need to tell your players how you would do it. No argument on my part or anybody else's part has any bearing on the situation. The only bearing on the situation that is important is how you would rule it as a dungeon master. Make sure it's clear and upfront. Okay, you don't need to tell them, oh, when you use minor illusion, when the situation comes up and you need to discuss it, because not everybody's going to come up with it and have to deal with this. When it comes up, just look, this is how I'm going to rule it, or this is how I'm going to do it, but I'm not too sure how I want to do it in the future, and that's what I'm going to do. So, Warren, if you feel it's absurd, then don't do it that way. Don't have it work the first way that I suggested. You could have it work the second way I suggested, or the third way I suggested. Do you know what I mean? But you also, when you're doing anything with the rules, you have to make sure that your rules are going to sit all right with the players. Now, sometimes players are totally unreasonable and a little bit ridiculous. But the thing with running any kind of rule system is the rules mean nothing if there's nobody at the table. If you can replace the players and you're happy to do that, that's cool. But if all of them leave, then you've got nobody to play with. And if you're happy for that to happen, then cool. But Warren, look, I run invisibility different to the dungeon master in the group that I'm playing with right now. So my group, we all dungeon master. So I run invisibility different to Mr. S. I also run invisibility different to Mr. JP, also a dungeon master in my group, because almost all of us are dungeon masters. And I run it different to Mr. J, also in my group, and also to Mrs. K. So everybody in my group runs invisibility differently. So we have to adjust to every different dungeon master when it's their turn coming up. You are allowed to actually do things with the rules, okay? Because ultimately they mean nothing. Okay, all right. So I've answered your question, Warren. You will tell me, Warren, if that was the answer you were expecting, or did that help in the slightest or not? Hello, how's it going, Overboard Miniature Gaming? Overboard is a patron, also a moderator. Best way to support me to make sure this class continues is on Patreon. Go there, you get everything that I do over there on Patreon. And you also ensure these classes continue live as a thing every single week. This is a thing I do every single week. Next week we do magic. All right, so, and Nacho Man is also here, also a patron. Hello, welcome. Now, Charles Butler. Hello, how are you, Charles? Pro tip for character creation. Also, don't make a character with a background almost exactly like your DM's childhood. Okay, all right. I feel like there's a message there that I don't quite understand the reference to, but yeah, I'm sure you'll explain it later. I'm not entirely sure what it's getting at, but there is a message I feel like that he's stashed in there somewhere that's trying to make a point. Right. What is that point? I'm still not too sure. Anyway, all right. So let's continue on. Moving along. Alfonso, how's that going? You are welcome. The Fandelta tips, you're welcome. Look, you've seen all my videos. Dude, do you know how many videos I have on the Lost Mine of Fandelta? I have a weekly live stream on that thing. You couldn't possibly have watched all of those things. You'd have gone mad by now. Avenging Blowfish, hello. I allow Minor Illusion to give total cover, but I treat it like a fog cloud where monsters can still attack through it at disadvantage. So Avenging Angel has taken the second approach that I had suggested. Okay? The second approach being that you apply disadvantage to the attack if they're using the cover. but it is dispelled after a single attack. Yeah, so the reality is that if the attack doesn't hit the player's character, but it potentially could have hit the pretend crate or barrel, then the gig is up. And I think that's probably how you one of the better ways to deal with that is like, yeah, it'll help you for at least one attack, but after that they know it's an illusion and they can see right through it because it's now transparent. Yep. The advantage is that I can be cast on others, but it's still just a single attack. Okay, I see where you're going with that. The point is to do with your my Batman meme. Yeah, no, I get the Batman meme. And I have been doing a lot of Batman memes recently. Right, okay, so there's a few questions floating around here. Let's get to some actual demonstration. There is some things that people probably want me to show you, so I'm going to show you and explain at the same time. So let's move over to our battle grid. And probably in this case, since I'm not planning to cover initiative unless somebody stipulates I need you to explain initiative to me, I'm going to leave initiative alone. So unless you want it, I'm not going to do it. Okay, so instead, what we're going to do is we're going to deal with each of the different rules that I just talked about and sort of show you with the miniatures. What you have in front of you is these are the player characters. I've got some dice here, which I'll roll if I need to, and here are some orcs with like a shaman at the back and a champion and whatever. Okay, so our first thing is using the hide action in combat. Hide. How does that look? So what I'm going to do is I think probably the best way to demonstrate this is to use our rogue, because our rogue, if I use the pre-made character for the rogue from the original Dungeons and Dragons starter set, they have a stealth modifier of 7, and so we would roll a 7 plus whatever if we want to do a hide. Okay, so we're gonna sort of play that out and sort of show you what we would have here. So there's my 20-sided dice. Right, so it requires your action to do so. Now if you're a first level rogue, it will require your action to do it. If you are a second level rogue and you have cunning action now, you can now do it as a bonus action, which means you don't have to give up that attack. And how does a hide work? Well, it's pretty simple. You can maneuver yourself into a place where you can hide. To hide, you really need to have some sort of cover. And if you don't have cover, then it won't work. Now the problem is with using cover is if they can see where you're moving into your cover, they still know where you went. So in the middle of a battle, it's kind of important to start out in the place that has cover. So before the orcs show up, if the rogue here is in the bushes, including any of the other characters here, then it's going to make a lot more sense, right? So what I'm going to suggest is here, it's going to look differently. At this point here, we roll our 20-sided dice before the battle even starts. We get a 19. 26 in total because I add my 7. And then I'm going to compare that with the passive perception or an active check if I wanted to, but I'm going to use passive perception on my orcs. They only have a 10. So the DC is a 10. Okay, so that succeeds. So they don't know that the rogue is there, but they know that these characters are here. So that means if I make an attack, I am unseen if I make my attack at range. If I were to move out and try to use a weapon, then I am going to be seen, and therefore I would not have the advantage on my first attack. Only my first attack. Yep, this is the very beginning when we're starting out at round 1. That's how it would look. The other thing you probably also want to consider is if they don't know that this character's here, it is possible to have the entire group surprised and this character not surprised, and this character here surprised them. It gets complicated when you start doing it without using group checks, but you could do it that way if you wanted to. But ultimately what you're going to get here, if you're starting in the bushes, is you're probably going to have advantage because they can't see you. As long as you don't step out to try and make a melee attack and you make a ranged attack, your arrow zips out of the bushes and hits one of them. and as long as the cover is good enough to hide you in some way. Yep. Now, I know people are going to say, oh, what sort of cover? Is it lightly obscured, heavily obscured? Is it going to have to be total cover? Like, what is it going to be? Look, if they've got some cover, just let them have it. Do you know what I mean? I mean, if you don't want to do it that way, don't do it that way. But ultimately, I think the rules are confusing enough around hiding and stealth and combat that you as a group and your dungeon master need to come to a decision about how you're going to do it. Warren, thanks for the well thought out answer. I'm heading to the second approach. Thanks, Nacho. Okay, so you're going to go with the attack will get disadvantage, and after they've made that attack, if it misses the character, it's probably hit the pretend obstacle, eh? Okay, so that's if we're starting at the battle. Now, if we are in the middle of a battle, it's going to look a little bit different. Same sort of thing might have happened. We might have rolled the same dice, doesn't matter. But if we start our battle, orcs here, players here, rogue takes their turn, they're a second level rogue or higher, and they go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. If they can move through here, they take the hide action, they roll the stealth, they got a 26. The passive perception is 10, but in the middle of a battle, orcs do not get to make a passive perception check. They are preoccupied and distracted by the fact that there are people to fight. In the middle of a fight, this rogue making that stealth check is probably going to automatically succeed, because you have to expend your action in battle to search. But it doesn't change the fact that the goblins saw the rogue enter the bush around about here. So they could start surrounding this location, thinking, oh, there must be a rogue somewhere here. Let's rummage around. That doesn't change that fact at all. Now, they might have guessed right about whereabouts he is, and they might have guessed wrong. They might be sort of around about here. Again, it doesn't change the fact that they could see where he went. But it also means that he should essentially have advantage on his attack, provided they don't discover him. Okay, so something to bear in mind when you're using this. Now, if they never get an opportunity to do this, if they never get an opportunity to move up and try and rummage around in the bushes, which may require, your dungeon master might decide that is going to be an action, but if we're dealing with a rogue who takes that, then the fighter moves up to engage, and the cleric does, and the wizard's over here, and then of course you've got your orcs fighting over here. Well, your rogue will probably still get advantage, and they can move and change position each time on their turn, and then take the hide action. So it works pretty good for a rogue. But for a player character who isn't a rogue, if it was like the cleric, every time they do this, they've got to use their action to hide, and it wouldn't be till the following turn that they would get to make their attack if they're making a ranged attack with advantage. So that's the hide action. All right, if I did not explain it clearly enough, you will let me know. I'm going to move on to the next thing that I'm pretty sure most of you want to know a little bit about, and that is the readied action. The readied action is just a giant pile of shite. It exists because we want to do more. And so the creators of the game have tried to ensure that we have the readied action. What can it be? Bonus action. Could be that. Could be a move. Could be an action. Any of these could be readied actions. Any of those. So we take that on our main action. As our main action is going to be used for whether it's our character or our monster. We stipulate the trigger, and then we go from there. So here's a couple of different ways that it can look for those of you who are interested. What's that, Avenging Blowfish? The Pack Tactics YouTube channel has a video that looks at an earlier version of 5e rules that explicitly states the condition to hide. Pack Tactics, I know Pack Tactics, And I've seen him do some stuff, and he's not unaware of the rules. I would just say his interpretation of the rules aren't great. He's a much bigger YouTuber than I am. Okay, and he does know his stuff to a certain point. But the reality is that there is so much conflicting information in the rules with regard to hiding that dungeon masters have to make the final decision. I've tried to point this out to people more than a few times. The creators of the game have also tried to explain when it comes to hiding, whether you look at earlier versions of the game, which I've got the very first printing of the player's handbook. Whether you look at earlier versions or not, the rules are awful. They also require a dungeon master to use their head. That's why they exist in the first place. You can't make rules that are explicitly able to cover all of that. Regardless of what stands between you and the viewer, it must cover at least half your body for you to hide behind it. So, again, hiding behind something, again, you've got to realize it requires some adjudication by the dungeon master. Because it's possible to hide and not have any cover. There are situations that would allow that. When would that be a situation where you could hide? When your enemy is not facing you and they've got the back turned. The rules do not apply for that because it assumes that you see everything in 360 degrees. We don't play games like that. People do not play games usually where the direction you're looking doesn't matter, particularly in a battle. Do you know what I mean? But before a battle, even more is the case. We do allow people to sneak up on somebody without having a bush covering them. Okay? So, again, this falls back on dungeon masters figuring out what to do with the hide rules for them. Okay, so now let's get to ready action. I want to do this because we're going to get sidetracked by hide action. Easily could take up the whole thing. So let's have a look at the ready action. There are a couple of things we could do. If we have a ready action, say we have a ready action as a bonus action, we might decide, okay, my fighter here is going to make an attack. They made an attack with the action. Then maybe they had moved up before. Maybe they changed position. Who knows? But they use their action, make an attack. They finish their attack. They use their bonus action if they've got a bonus action. And their bonus action is whatever their feature is. And then they decide to use action surge. We can use action surge, which gives you another action to use it as a readied action. And I'm going to ready my action here is, my readied action is, I don't want to attack the orcs unless they attack me. So I'm going to say something to them. I say, surrender, you can't beat us. Something like that. And then you ready an action to swing your sword and attack the orcs if they attack you or one of your mates. And you're using your action surge because your action surge gives you another action. So you could do it that way. Also, if we go and have a look at, say, the rogue, and it's a level 2 rogue and have cunning action, we can ready our bonus action to, what is it? Oh, ready action, bonus action. No, that doesn't work. We can't ready our bonus action to disengage or to, hide. Because one, we're not got anything to hide in. We're right out in the open, and they're looking right at us. We can't disengage because it would require us to use our movement. So this is one situation where we couldn't use our bonus action to do that. But if you have a bonus action, for example, that is Misty Step, it would kind of make sense to allow that to happen. Okay, I'll use the spell Misty Step as a bonus action to teleport away if somebody attacks me. So that would be something that a wizard would do if you were engaged with the orcs. Now, one of the things around the wording with regards to the readied action is it doesn't really state anything about a bonus action. It states and refers to the movement, it refers to actions, but it doesn't state and refer specifically to the bonus action. So it's kind of going to be left up to the dungeon master to decide how that's going to work. Now, we can also ready movement. Yep, so I can ready movement. I can decide that, so if I'm the cleric here, I can ready an action to move. If, say for example, the fight looks like it's going bad, so my target, my trigger that I'm going to stipulate as my ready action is I'm going to say, okay, if the orcs start to overwhelm us and somebody goes down, or I find myself in a position where certain characters lose too many hit points, I'm going to move as part of my ready action. That's my ready action. I'm using my action to do that, and it's a movement that I'm readying. I could have moved out of the bushes before that, that's my movement, and then used my action, using no bonus action, and I read an action to just move away. I'm basically readying a dash. And if that happens, and they start to get swarmed, and somebody goes down, okay, there's my trigger, and I can now move away. I'm trying to pull and take myself out of trouble. So the ready action is kind of complicated. There's a lot you can do with it. It requires a lot of adjudication by a dungeon master. So as players, try to be gentle with your dungeon master, because it's very confusing. It's very confusing. It's not clear cut. And there are so many things that are actions, use up movement, or are bonus actions nowadays. You can even ready an interaction, people. If you really wanted to, you could ready an interaction. What is an interaction? An interaction might be as simple as, we're standing here. Instead of getting into a fight, we're just going to talk with these orcs. So we have a conversation. But I decide, even though the Dungeon Master said roll initiative, I am going to ready an action to draw my sword if the conversation with the orcs goes badly and they try to attack us. I'll draw my sword. So an interaction is drawing your sword. That might be the thing you ready. Now, is there any point in doing that? Maybe not, but you can. You know what I mean? Or you decide, I've got a cup of ale in my hand. I'm going to drink the cup of ale, or give the cup of ale to the orcs if they look like they are going to, the negotiations aren't going well. Now, would you be doing this in the middle of a combat? Probably not, but it's a poor example, I know. But there, you can ready those sorts of things. It doesn't stipulate specifically that you can ready an interaction, doesn't stipulate specifically that you can ready a bonus action. It only mentions movement and action. But the others, are they really a big deal? Okay. No one knows why that never made it to print. Yeah, I remember the video. I remember the video, but yeah, but it doesn't solve the problem. It never would have solved the problem. I know he's adamant that it would, but it would not have. Okay. Big Clue, what do you got here? I'm going to just rip on back to my face before I continue on our journey of discovery, as I try to explain things with miniatures and dice. We'll see how this works. DMs always have to make the final decision, and it doesn't matter what the rules are. Book or edition. That's why they exist. Dungeon Masters exist to be able to try to figure out all the complexities of what you're trying to do with a player's character and the Dungeon Master's interaction. And if without them, it's not Dungeons and Dragons anymore. It's something else, which is fine. But yeah, as long as you understand that Dungeons and Dragons is not a true game of skill. You're not playing chess. As long as you understand you're not playing chess, although I know a lot of people do view it as like a tactical board game, it really isn't a tactical board game. Or they would like it to be a tactical board game. A tactical board game, even 4E, which is probably the closest to a tactical board game that I've ever played. I've played in Dungeon Master it. It still had nuances you had to figure out. Okay. Algerio, I think I got your name right. Aljadro, I think that's right. As an extra complex mechanic, I think you should talk about the official chase mechanics in D&D 5e. Oh my god, you got to be kidding. Most people just do skill checks, but there are mechanics that involve extra combat rules. So first off, I would never consider talking about the chase mechanics in 5e. The chase mechanics in the Dungeon Master Guide are rubbish. Recently, we made a skill challenge, which is a chase, where I present it as a narrative, 3-stage narrative, and you have a number of different mechanics you could use or different options that you could adjudicate. So it's a bit more fluid rather than too mechanical. If that's your thing, then great. But I can assure you, you're better to just go and check out that final skill challenge that we built to get an idea of how to contend with dealing with a chase, because the chase mechanics in the Dungeon Master Guide aren't very good. They will just confuse you and frustrate you if you're a Dungeon Master. Okay, Nacho. As a DM, I refuse to get into arguments at the table with my players. If I'm unsure of the rules, I make a decision to keep the game moving and let my players look up the official rules later. Okay, fair enough, which is fine. This is kind of what most people would probably do, hopefully. James, absolute quality content. Okay. You're welcome. I'm glad that you like the content, James. Hello, how are you doing? What do you got here? Avenging Blowfish. We need to move on to the next rule that I want to talk about, but we'll go through the chat very quickly. I'll let my players ready an action, bonus action, movement. Yes, yeah, do that. But they can only choose one. That's right. That's the thing that you've got to remember is you can't ready an action in conjunction with movement and a bonus action. So you're not readying your entire turn. You're only readying one thing. And that's the thing that players have the hardest time understanding. So you only get to choose to ready your action, your movement, your bonus action if that's being allowed, which I think there's no reason why not to, or your interaction if that's what you want to use. But I mean, essentially your interaction is just your action being used. If you're pulling a lever or whatever, I mean, you know, it's probably just going to fall under that. It doesn't change anything ultimately. Okay. So yes, I also let the lower of their initiative if they want, but it stays the way the rest of the combat. Okay. All right. I don't generally worry about moving them around in initiative order if they've readied an action. That's just way too confusing for me. If that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. One of the important things to remember about ready actions is that it uses up a reaction. Yeah. It's not an opportunity attack. That's right. You only get one reaction per round. So if you ready an action and you suddenly there's an opportunity to make an opportunity attack, the monsters do something or whatever, you can make an opportunity attack. If you take that, you lose your readied action. Does that make sense? You haven't taken your reaction until you decide to do so. It's just in place as a marker. Also, too, you can, when you get to the trigger as the player or the Dungeon Master, if you decide you set a trigger for your ready action and you decide, no, I don't like that anymore, just don't worry about it. Just leave it. You lost your action, you still got your ready action, but you didn't actually trigger it. Done. Now, so where are we going? Where did I get to? I think I got to there. So yes, Dungeons and Chronics. Hello, Dungeons and Chronics. How are you doing? Now, so I want to also just say one thing. The chase mechanics in Dungeons and Dragons 5e, the Dungeon Master Guide, they're not very good. But would it have been easier to actually make a set of chase mechanics that are easy and make sense for the game? And unfortunately, chase mechanics, just like the hide action, whether it's in combat or out of combat, is one of those things that is too hard to codify. Now, I know there are people who say 3.5 did it. They did a really good job in 4e. It can be done, Fred. It never really worked that way. I've played those games. And somebody's probably going to say they did it in Pathfinder. They did it in Pathfinder. No, they didn't. Pathfinder is still clinging to an old rule system which they tack and make a few adjustments to. It's open game license. It's essentially the 3.5 rules with a few tinkering bits going on. None of it's ever done that right. You know why? You can't do chase scenes as just mechanics, people, because it's going to have a narrative. And that's the thing you've got to remember. All right. When I say I'll look into the official rules later, I mean I asked Fred. Yeah, sure you will. Sure you will. Okay, let's move on to the next thing that I was talking about. Now that's grapple. We haven't done grapple, and I want to do grapple. Actually, I actually want to do a bit more than just grapple, as it happens. But we're going to do grapple right now. So grappling. Grappling is a confusing thing, is it not? Because apparently grappling works slightly different for whoever's putting the grapple on and whoever's trying to resist the grapple. So, guess what? You guys, get out of the way. All of you, out of the way. We're going to stick it. We've just got a fighter and we've got our orc, and that's all we're going to deal with. We're not going to deal with anybody else. Everybody else is going to stay out of the way. If I am the fighter and I decide I want to grapple this orc, I can. That's fine. Not a problem. So how do I go about doing that? Well, I get to make and choose. I can either make a strength check or an athletics check. One or the other. So if I'm proficient with athletics, then I would use athletics. This character has a +5. This fighter has a +5. So I take my 5 and I roll my 20-sided dice. And as my action, or one of my attacks, if I have more than one attack, this is what I get. Okay, 12. 5 for the modifier for athletics, and add the 7 from the dice on my 20-sided dice, and I got a 12. Okay, now I have to compare that with whatever the orc has to do. Now the orc gets a choice. So what you're going to do is, the orcs don't have athletics and they don't have acrobatics on their stat block, but they do have a dex modifier and a strength modifier. And because the strength modifier for the orc is a 3, that's the number we're going to use to contest this grapple. And then they make a 20-sided dice roll. That's the dungeon master will be doing this. And I get an 11. Okay. So 3 for my strength modifier, 11 for what I rolled on the dice. This is the orc that I'm doing it for. And I get a 14. So unfortunately, our fighter trying to put that grapple on failed. I needed to get greater than that. Not equal to, but greater than. Okay? If I try to put the grapple on and instead this had been a 12. So for example, if I'd rolled up, what would it be? It would be a, if we reverse engineer this a little bit, 3, 9. I would have to have rolled a 9. Can I find a 9 on my dice? Yeah. 9 there. So if I rolled a 9 on the 20-sided dice, the final result of this would have looked like this. 12. Both got 12. I tried to put the grapple on. Wouldn't work. Do you know why? Because the orc got the same thing. This is a contest. You have to get greater than, not equal to, greater than. If I'd gotten less, so for example, I had rolled a Ahori 6, not a Hori 6. Not a Hori 6. Not a Hori 6. I'm rolling the wrong person. If our fighter had rolled a lower number than a 7, do I get a lower than a 7? Apparently no. I'm going to roll really high. There's a 2. There you go. That's what I normally roll. So if I rolled for my grapple and I got a 2 on my dice, add my modifier and I got a 7, well, that's definitely going to fail as well. No change before, this fails. So essentially, when you get equal to, you're failing. If you get less than, you're failing. The only time you're actually succeeding on your grapple is when you get greater than. Okay, so that's how your grapple works. The same process, the exact same process. I just rub this out and everything I just showed you is the shove. The grapple just means they can't move around. I have now grabbed them. I must have a hand free to do that. But the shove means I could push them down to the ground. Pushing them down to the ground is good. Do you know why pushing down to the ground is good? Because if I have my mates nearby and they get up close, he's prone, they can all bash on him with melee attacks if they wanted to and smack him. And they get to roll 2 dice. This is probably the only time that you want to be shoving a creature prone, is when you're higher in initiative and so is the rest of your party. If they're high in the initiative, then this is the time to do it, because now they get to make their attacks with advantage, because orc is on the ground. Had them while they're down. Yep. But a good time maybe, let's get rid of these people again. Maybe I decide, well, whoops, move that character completely out of the way. Maybe I don't want to push them prone. Maybe I want to push them back 5 feet. Probably the best time to push somebody back 5 feet is when you can push them into something. Okay? Another time you might want to push them back is so that others can escape without having to worry about an attack of opportunity. So if you had the whole party here, all sort of fighting off this orc, and for whatever reason, say our rogue or our cleric needs to back off, the fighter could push them back, and as long as they get to act before the orc, they can now leave without worrying about attacks of opportunity. So you're either trying to push them into a fire or something that will hurt them, or off a cliff, or give your allies an opportunity to run away, because now they can move and then dash. Okay, moving and dashing is good when you want to run away, because you can go a lot further. We can get pretty much off the board if we wanted to. Zip off. Of course, we leave the fighter on their own, but they already knew that was going to happen. So that's the shove. Right. Let's go back to the chat very quickly, and we'll see how our questions are going before it's the top of the hour. Grapple is one of my favourite mechanics. Super underrated. It is super underrated. The grappler feat I hate, by the way, is also interesting. I don't like it at all. But then again, so I've trained in the martial arts for years. I don't now, but I can assure you that a lot of the dice mechanics around grapple I don't like. The grappler feat, again, I don't make any sense to me whatsoever. I dislike it immensely. It's just a codification. It's just another excuse for Wizards of the Coast to make up rules so that they can convince you that you need to go and buy their stuff. And you don't need that grappler feat. Do you know the game runs so much better without it? I know you're thinking, but now I can't pin and restrain them. Yes, you can. You grapple them, and once you've grappled them, you might do it again, and now you've pinned them. You might do that on your next turn, or if you have 2 actions, and you action surge like the fighter, then you can do it grapple followed up by a pin. If you have more than one attack, I would allow a player to do this. This is not official rules, people. I would allow a player to go, I'm going to use one of my attacks to grapple. If I succeed on the grapple, I'm going to follow it up and try to pin them. Yep, make another grapple check. If you succeed, you get greater than whatever they are resisting with, then you now pin them. Now they're restrained. That makes much more sense to me. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that feat at all. If you like it, that's fine, but I actually have banned it from my group. It's not the only thing that I've banned from my group. And my players, some of my players were like getting really upset, and I said, now I can't do any grappling if I want the grappler feat. I said, well, were you going to take the grappler feat anyway? No. And I said, okay, well now you can just use it because you don't have to worry about that thing. Every time they make another rule, it stops players being able to do stuff. And this is one of the things I don't like myself. I think it shouldn't even be a feat just as a default for anyone with a strength requirement. So again, I agree. I don't think that the feat should exist. I think any character should be able to try to grapple and pin somebody, because that's part of your training. When I was doing my martial arts training, it was part of the training. We had to learn how to do that. It was all part and parcel. The other thing is, I don't want to get caught up in like it should only be strength, because I've seen very light, quick women or children put on a grapple and hold somebody down, and they weren't that strong. They were certainly weaker than their opponent. They were just faster, and they understood leverage. And as soon as you understand leverage and you're fast, it's a dangerous combination. Yeah. Anyway. Now, how would you rule moving a grappled creature if the grappler does not move? How would you rule moving a grappled creature if the grappler does not move? Okay. Well, interesting. Let's have a look at that. Let's have a look at what that would look like. I think that's actually not a bad question to ask. Originally, I couldn't grapple creatures larger than you unless you had the grappler feat. They removed the rule in playtest, but it didn't buff the grapple feat to compensate. So I have no problems with having restrictions. So, for example, I have grappled people who are significantly larger than myself. It can be done. And I have been able to shove them and throw them around. So leverage is very important. Now, whether we reflect that in the game is a different story. But based on reality, so this is what I would say to you. Let's go back to our table again. And just see, so if we're talking about grappling and shoving and how that should look, let's go back to grapple. Grapple. So my fighter has grappled the orc. They are of a certain size. That size is medium size. So we can move them around. So if we don't decide to move, can we shift their position? And I would say yes. I would say yes, we could. I feel like it would be reasonable to allow us to move them around our square and drag them to any of these squares that we need them to be in without moving the character itself. But I would still burn up movement for the fighter or the character doing it. Every square you try to drag the orc through is going to be half your movement. It's going to be double the movement. So if you drag them to 5 foot across without actually moving, I would say you burn up 10 squares or 10 feet. No, not 10 squares. 2 squares or 10 feet of your speed movement. If we drag them 2 squares, it's going to be 20 feet of your speed. So we can really, there will be a limit to how far we can drag them. That's how I would do it. I think that's what you were aiming for, right? That's what you were trying to ask, is how do we adjudicate if they want to drag them around from their central point, but they're not actually moving as such? If we grab them and we want to move with them, can we move them backward and can we move them forward? Again, I think it doesn't matter. I think if you grab them and you're able to move them, moving them backward or moving them forward, moving somebody forward is actually going to be harder to do than pushing them backward. That's just the general physics of your body. And if you've ever been involved in any kind of fighting and grappling and shoving and any kind of judo, pushing somebody backwards with the grapple, you're not actually shoving. It's not the shove action. You're just moving them. You're still holding on to them. They're not going to go prone, but moving them around that way, it still makes sense as far as I'm concerned. That's how I would rule it. Whether you rule it that way is a different story. Okay. Anyway, I think we covered that question reasonably well. All right. So I wanted to cover next thing. I did that one. Cover rules. Cover rules are a pain in the butt. Like, if we look at how cover rules are supposed to work and how they wind up working, it's always confusing. So let's do a little bit of work around the cover rules. Yeah, that's how I rule it too. But if I felt it needed to be addressed, since it's a common situation that is not in the rule book, yeah. Again, not all the rules in the book will solve your problems. You just need to use your head and sort of think, okay, what would make sense? Okay. What I suggested is just one way to do it. That's what I would do because that makes sense to me. All right. Now, I know somebody's going to say, yeah, but if you do it that way, why would you ever bother using the shove action to shove somebody backward? Very simple. You don't want to move into the square they're standing in. That would be a bad idea. That would be a situation. Also, shove allows you to knock them prone. So that's another reason to use it. Okay, so let's have a look at the next thing I wanted to discuss, which I believe is on my list, is cover. Cover rules. So this is half. So what does half cover look like? Well, let's get rid of this. We'll move these fellows over here. They're doing their own thing. Cover rules. Is it working? Yes, thank you. So we've got our orcs over here. We've got a spellcaster. Let's just say this spellcaster here can cast Fireball, maybe, or some other spell. How does that work? I would say if we have our fighter here and we've got our player characters and our fighter's standing behind a crate, it's not a minor illusion crate, I would say this is covering about half the body. So this fighter should probably be getting, if This character here, this wizard or orc shaman or whatever is casting, say, firebolt, you should be getting a +2 to your armor class for your fighter. +2. Okay? It's a +2. Because it's half of it covered, half your body covered. If the rogue is standing in front of us, we should probably also get a +2. Fighter still gets a +2 if it's being targeted, because guess what? We've got a rogue that presents us with a nice bit of cover. Get rid of the rogue. What about if we have, say, the wizard standing in front, or another character roughly about the same sort of size as us? Also, +2. Okay, we get a cover bonus, because even if they have to shoot past your own the enemy, even if the orc wizard is having to shoot past their own enemy, it's still going to be another +2 to this character. Okay. And the same thing applies to dexterity. So you get a +2 to your dexterity saving throw. But you have to have it. And you've also got to make sure the spell that's being cast does not state that it ignores cover. Some spells ignore cover completely. And they're usually an area effect spell, but not always. Some spells come from the sky, like Sacred Flame. Cover bonuses won't help you there. Okay? It's coming from above. So that's half cover. 3/4 cover. 3/4 cover is going to look a little bit different. 3/4. And we get a +5 for this on our armor class, and a +5 for a dexterity saving throw. So what would that look like? Well, I said an arrow slit. But we could also say I've stacked 2 dice on top of each other. That kind of the character can just see over the top. If I get rid of that and I put like a 4-sided dice on top there, say that maybe that's 3/4 cover. So you as a dungeon master have to decide what counts as 3/4 cover. Now, there are some guidelines in the book, and it won't have all the guidelines that you need, so you'll have to make some adjudications. And players, let them make adjudications, okay? It's not always obvious. It doesn't really matter too much whether you realize it or not. It ultimately won't change an awful lot. So, now I know you're thinking, Fred, of course it changes everything, because my character could wind up dying. No, it doesn't, because you're going to get to play the game again. Characters dying doesn't mean you stop playing the game. You know what I mean? Whether you play the same character when it dies, or whether you play a different character when it dies, you're still playing the game. You know what I mean? So, yeah. Anyway, so that's 3/4 cover. And like I said, 3/4 of your body needs to be covered. Now, total cover. What will total cover look like for this situation? Well, now I just put see this thing? This is quite tall. You can see how tall our miniature is. Well, that's total cover. Ain't that total cover? Well, that's definitely total cover. Yeah, but here's the problem with total cover. And I'll just get rid of this and write down the word total cover. We can't target the character if we have dealing with total cover. You can't see it. So firebolt won't work. Total cover. You can't see it. You can't target it with a firebolt. So no choice. That wizard won't do anything. But there's another spell that could potentially wreck that. And that is, as I said, spells that allow you a way of negating or ignoring cover. But Fireball is probably the most common one you're going to come across. What happens when the wizard decides, I can see the corner of that bush there. I'm going to target there. Bam. And it spreads, goes round corners. So it means I can still hit the fighter with a fireball. I'd hit probably all the rest of my orcs as well. I can move it further back if I wanted to. Maybe I target it just behind the wall. And I target it about there. And I'm still going to get whoever's standing behind the wall. I can target further back as long as I can see that point to hit it. As long as I can see that point. So I can change my position if I need to. So total cover won't solve all your problems, because as long as they can see the point where the origin is going to be laid down, I think that's roughly about right, yeah, something like that, then bam, fireball goes off. As long as I can see the target point, bam. And the cover didn't work. Even if I put the effect further here, so if I move this back, even if we're dealing with this sort of cover here, even if I decide, okay, I'm going to put down the fireball roughly about here. Well, the thing goes round corners, so it's still going to affect the player characters. Hit the corner of the wall, it still goes right round, and it's going to affect a whole bunch of the characters behind. So total cover doesn't solve your problems every single time. Hopefully it can, but no, not always. Now I probably should take a break, but I'm going to check the comment section and very quickly. What happens in a tug of war, like if I am trying to pull someone while someone else is doing the same? Good point. So let's do that. Let's make that. What is that going to look like, people? A tug of war. Now, if it's just one person to one person, it's nice and simple. Tug of war with one person. Rope to rope tugging. Well, it's really simple. You use a contest. Whoever gets the highest wins. If you get a draw, it's a stalemate, and the tug of war continues. Do you know what I mean? That tug of war is basically just a contest. Tug of war. Use a contest. Now, a tug of war is probably very strength focused, but you could use athletics as well. I would say you're probably best to just use strength or athletics. Tug of war. Whoever gets the higher is the one who pulls the other back, whether it be the orc or the player. If you're dealing with a group hanging onto a rope, that gets a lot more complicated. Now you're probably dealing with something like a group check, and I don't want to even go there with that one. So Dungeons & Chronics, hopefully that answered your question. No. So one of the things. So let's pull up Fireball, shall we? So your question around Fireball. Let's go to the D&D Beyond Fireball. Let's pull up that spell, and I will switch over my camera to D&D Beyond so you can actually see what I'm looking at. Just give me a second. I'm just transitioning it over. And I'm just going to grab that screen, put that over here so it's out of the way. Then my head's out of the way. Okay, cool. All right, so this is Fireball. And so what the question is, if we wanted to throw a fireball into a darkened cave, if we can't see into the cave, then we can't target it. Well, let's have a look at what the spell says. Because usually the spell does most of the work. Not always, but most of it. A bright streak flashes from your pointed fingertips to a point you choose within range and then blossoms with a low roar into an explosion of flame. Okay. So Fireball specifically says a point you choose. It says nothing about seeing that point. Now I stipulate you have to see the point, but the spell it just says you select. Okay. You point your finger to a point you choose within range. Now, I think the understanding in terms of rules as intended is that you point at a spot that you can see. But let's continue on with this. Each creature in a 20-foot radius sphere centered on that point must make a dexterity saving throw. The fire spreads around corners as stated. It ignites flammable objects in an area that aren't being worn or carried. So we've got an awful lot to play with. So first off, could we throw it into a darkened cave? Well, if we can't see in the dark, even a darkened cave, even the first part of that dark cave, there's probably going to be some light. It might be dim light, but we probably can see a certain distance in. Since we actually have to choose, and it says choose, but I think the intention is you see, guess what? This is one of those times where a dungeon master is going to make a ruling. You're going to decide, do you have to see that point, or can you choose the point? Okay? But you're pointing your finger at something, right? How it's going to play out. And this is the problem with people who are looking at the rules and trying to nickel and dime every word and every part of the definition of how the spell works. Do you know why we're doing this, people? It's because the players and the dungeon master are apparently playing chess. And look, make a decision about how you want it to run, because that's the wording for it. For me, I would probably require them to be able to see the point that they target with fireball. That's how I would do it. That's how most of the dungeon masters in my group do it. Whether you do that and whether you decide they can just choose a point no matter what, it's up to you, because it just says you point your finger to a point you choose within range. Could be any point as long as you choose it. But then, of course, doesn't make sense that you could choose a point that's sort of like in a room that's closed with no access point. So you just use your brain, people. Just use your brain. That's my suggestion to you. Use your brain. Okay. Okay. I think we're ready to move on to the next thing I want to cover, but I'm probably going to go and take a small break before I do that, and then ask you a question that will come through. So I'm assuming Blowfish, Avenging Blowfish, that answered your question with regard to using Fireball in a darkened cave. If it didn't, you let me know. So I'm going to ask you a question. Hashtag, where is it? Hashtag. Let me just go back to my face for a second while I do this. So my question to you is hashtag, do you have issues around the death saving throw? That is my question, people. So feel free to answer that. Do you have issues around the death saving throw? Whether you're a player or a dungeon master, I am curious if you are having issues around this. Okay. So I'm going to put up that question for you. I'm going to take a short break, come back, and we will proceed to deal with the death saving throw. Arnold will look after you for probably 5 or less minutes. Alright, coming back in here. Life in the lane, life in the drain, life somewhere. Okay. The death saving throw. Death saving throws. Aren't they fun? Some people like them, some people don't. We've got to have them at some point. Someone's got to die today. Anybody want to volunteer? All right, here we go. So, death saves. Death. Save. Fail. Success. And we have our dots. Okay, I think I am ready to transition over. Let's get out of the break. Let's have a look at what people had to say. Blowfish, what do you got here? I like the death saving throw mechanic because I don't like to kill a player. Well, I'm glad. I don't like killing players either, because killing players is actually illegal. Killing characters is not. Okay? I know you, I know I'm jesting a little bit here, but yeah. No, we don't kill players, we only kill their characters. You like a challenging combat. I don't attack downed characters, players. I don't attack downed players either because that's, again, illegal. But I will attack downed characters. So again, this is one of those things where it's about not the dungeon master. The dungeon master's controlling the monsters. That's all they're doing. I think the problem is that too often people associate what the dungeon master does with the monsters as a personal thing. Now maybe that you got a dungeon master who's like that, but that's never been the intent behind it. The intent is that somebody has to run the monsters, and you run the monsters like the monsters would be run, which is they want to kill the player characters. That's just how it is. Milton, it's so hot and I don't get an ice cream. It's so hot. Put it on the magnifying glass above New Zealand to punish me. It is very hot and my office is stinky hot. It's really, really bad. I really am struggling a little bit with the heat right now. But then again, it'll rain as well, so that'll make it even more interesting. All right, let's get over to saving throws before we run out of time. Saving throws. Let's have a look at what this looks like. Saving throws. So here we are. Someone has to die. Who will die today? Well, if a orc dies, they don't get a saving throw normally, not unless the dungeon master says so. So if this one if that orc gets reduced to 0 hit points, they're dead. Bye bye, you're gone. See you later. Nice having you, but you don't get to do anything else. Now we've still got some other orcs here, but what during the fight is okay. So the cleric goes down. They're on 0 hit points, and they're not dead. They're just dying. So they weren't instantly killed by the blow. So there's those orcs have great axes, so they can do a lot of damage, right? So at the beginning of the cleric's turn, they get to make a saving throw. That's the time you make the saving throw. So we take that dice, that 20-sided dice. I have no modifier. There are spells that will affect this. And at the beginning of my turn as the cleric, I will roll this dice. And I roll it once, and I got a 9. Remember how I said a 9 or less is a failure? So we get 1 failure. Then we roll round to the next round of combat. And so actually maybe I will actually do this this way. So it's a cleric, and we will push these fellas over here, and then we can just sort of squish that in there. There we go, there we go, there we go, there we go. All right, that's what's going on for now. So you can see here, round 1, cleric took their turn. On round 2, when the cleric takes their turn, again we roll a 20-sided dice. Provided nothing else has happened, I rolled an 11. So if I roll a 10 or more, I get a success. So that's a success. Rolls round to the cleric's turn, and it's now round 3. What does that look like? Well, I roll again a 20-sided dice at the beginning of my turn. I get 11. That's another success. Add that on. We move around to round 4. Cleric's still dying. Nobody's tried to heal them or stabilize them. They're still fighting their battle, whatever it is. Okay, and we get, now this is a time where we might actually be stable, or maybe we get a failure. Now this time is interesting. A 1 on a 20-sided dice. Remember how I said a 1 is a failure, but it's worse than just one failure. You get 2 failures if you roll a 1. If you roll a 2 to 9, it's 1 failure, but if you roll a 1, you get 2 failures. That means 2 failures, you are dead and out of there. Dead as a doorknob. Bye-bye to the cleric. Take the cleric away. Let's continue our fight, shall we? Maybe we lose another orc in the process. I'm going to rub this out. And we're going to peruse this again. From a slightly different perspective, I hope. Here we go. So this time, the rogue goes down. And they're on 0 hit points. But they're not dead, they're just dying. And when it rolls around to their turn, so this is the rogue's turn, the first round that they are on 0 hit points, when it's their turn, they roll that 20-sided dice. So again, I got a 20. Now 20 is a good example. That this sort of eliminates a lot of me having to do ticks and so forth. 20 means I have 1 hit point. I have just gained 1 hit point. My eyes don't flicker open unless I want them to flick open. I don't stand up immediately. I have to choose to stand up. But I also get to use because it takes place at the very beginning of your turn, your rogue gets to choose to take an action, use a bonus action, use an interaction, and also you can get your movement. So the sensible thing is I will stand up, use half my movement, and I could continue to fight, or I could use my bonus action to disengage and move away. So I could do that if I wanted to and leave the fighter to it. That's a choice. So rolling a 20 on a death saving throw is a good thing. You want that. But there's no guarantee. There's a 1 in 20 chance you're going to get that. Okay? All right. So that was a good example. Quite helpful. So we'll get rid of the rogue. We're down to our fighter and our wizard now as they fight on these various orcs. Now, a blow comes through. We lose yet another one of the orcs. And this fight is continuing. Our wizard is over here casting spells. And the fighter goes down. Bad news. Bad news for that wizard. Probably going to wind up getting swamped very shortly. Yep. So we'll move to the fighter. And round 1. So on the first round, they are on 0 hit points. They are dying but not dead. We make our death saving throw. So I rolled a 5. Well, that's a failure. This time, though, we're not going to get a chance to roll round and take a second turn with the fighter because the DM is next. And the DM can choose to attack a downed character. When you attack a downed character, things change. So if you hit a character who is down, so for example, if I have the wizard cast Firebolt, and it would be a disadvantage because one, they're prone, but also there's a whole lot of cover, there's a whole lot of orcs standing in the way. I could do that, and if I hit that fighter who is prone with a disadvantage with my Firebolt, and with the extra armor class they have because there's a whole lot of orcs standing in the way, probably another +2, that counts as another failure. Okay? Now, it depends on the damage too. If that damage is enough to outright kill me, so in other words, if it is going to cause minus my maximum hit points, then I would be dead in one blow from that firebolt. If it doesn't do that, then I only lose one failed save. Okay, one death saving throw is lost from taking damage. It doesn't cause instant death. Unfortunately, it gets more complicated because if the orcs now take their turn, each one of them gets to make an attack with a great axe. And because they're in melee within 5 feet, when you're within 5 feet of a downed character who's unconscious and dying, you get advantage on the attack because they are prone. So that means you get to roll 2 dice to make the attack. These orcs are going to be rolling a 12-sided dice to do their damage. If they hit, it counts as a critical, even if I don't roll a 20. So even if the orcs don't roll a 20, it's counted as a critical. That means when you get hit with a critical hit, no matter what the damage is, that counts as 2 failures. Well, we got way too many failures now, didn't we? So the last thing you want to have anything happen is you don't want your characters down. You do not want the enemy right next to them within 5 feet making melee attacks on them, because you wind up losing 2 of your death saving throws. You're much more likely to die. Now, it's one of the reasons why a lot of dungeon masters dislike attacking a downed character, particularly in melee, because the chances of death are extremely high. It's more than likely going to take place. And they feel like that can look like they are being unfair. But that is the reality, is that your monsters, when they go down, they're dead. They get no saving throws. This is an extra layer of protection for the player characters. So how you adjudicate it as a dungeon master and how you view it as a player, it's not being punitive in any way. It is just, remember, you're already getting an extra layer of survivability by having this mechanic in place. So that's how your death saving throws work in the game. Now, if I haven't covered anything, you'll let me know, but I'm pretty sure I have covered everything there is to say about the death saving throw in terms of the basics of the game. So let's have a look at the chat. Being secretive about the death saving throws is something we do at our table as well. We don't let the other players know if we failed or succeeded. They will only know when we are conscious and get back up because we rolled a 20, or because somebody cast a healing spell on us and we are now up and ready to go again. Okay, so now let's have a look at your questions. There's actually one other thing I want to talk about with regard to the death saving throw, for those of you who are interested. I will attack downed player. No, you don't attack downed players. You only attack downed characters. Attacking the actual player themselves is illegal. Comical effect, because sometimes it's just funny when somebody falls over. So my group have a pretty good and healthy view of character death, should it happen. And that is, can we please use reincarnate and use the biggest table for bringing them back, so that we have a chance of them coming back as something like a jellyfish. So most of the players at my table have a fairly, but they've been playing a long time. If you've got newer people, they might feel a bit differently about the whole thing. I generally try not to have characters who are new die, but players will find ways to make that possible without any of your help whatsoever, or any of your input whatsoever. Sometimes they just do things that are really, really silly and have really bad luck. It's not necessarily a game of skill. Okay, Blowfish. Selectively applying death saving throws to NPCs, monsters can create tense moments. Yes, it can. And Lost One Fendelver, I have Yimmick threaten to push a 1 hit point Sildar off the cliff, where he would have where he would have to make death saving throws. Yes, so Sildar Hallwinter from the Lost Mine of Fendelver was a good example. If you're pushing off the cliff and he's probably going to wind up losing that hit point and then have to make death saving throws, and you don't want to die outright, it's a good time to apply it. Sometimes you want your villain to have death saving throws so they're not dead outright. That's only going to be useful if the player characters are wanting to keep the villain that you've taken down as player characters, if you want to actually interrogate them and keep them alive. And also, too, there needs to be somebody to be able to get them up if their side has got clerics or some sort of healing magic. What else? No, the cleric died. We are going to have to burn his mini and shatter his gas in the four kingdoms. No, we're not going to burn the mini. Okay, I like to imagine our buddy trying to apprehend a rogue. So this is where I want to say in terms of death saving throws and character death. There's nowhere in the rules that says that when a character dies, you have to roll up a new character, people. Okay? It took me years to get over that after being told that that's how it had to be. There's nowhere in the rules that says it has to work that way. All right? You can make death in your game work any way you like. Whether you're the dungeon master, a little bit of negotiation with your players, it's kind of fun to make sure that your characters can come back from death and deal with other stuff. It's kind of fun. It really is. Suddenly my race has changed, and yeah, that reincarnate's kind of useful, but core blimey, now I've got to do a whole lot of rebuilding on my character. And that's one of the consequences of reincarnate. It's probably a better consequence than raise dead. It's one of the reasons why our group always favors reincarnate over raise dead. And I don't think anybody really wants true resurrection. but anyway, the other thing I want to say about the death saving throws. If you don't like the death saving throws for 5e, if you dislike them as the dungeon master and your group is happy to lose the death saving throws from your group so that you don't use death saving throws, stripping out the death saving throws from the game is super easy. It is absolutely easy peasy. There's nothing to it. I did a video discussing how to do it. For those of you who are unsure, like, Fred, are you sure about that? Seriously, you can take the death saving rules out of the game if you don't want to have them there. That means that when a monster gets to 0 hit points, they're dead. When a player character gets to 0 hit points, they're dead. And then what happens with the story after that is really completely up to you. Maybe you're using resurrection magic. Maybe you're building a new character. Maybe you're doing something else I haven't even suggested. Do you know what I mean? Maybe the gods bring them back to life. I mean, it's always fun to have a character come back to life because of the gods. There's nothing there that is stopping you from actually just removing it from the game. And I know a lot of people get caught up in this. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you very clearly what would happen, because there's a couple of questions people usually have with regard to, but if I do that, like, how does this work and how does that work and blah, blah, blah. So you can take it out of the game, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's all perfectly fine. How would it work? So let me go over to that screen now, and I will explain. Oops, that didn't work quite the way I was hoping. Is this gonna, yeah, I'll get my face, grab it, rinky-dinky it over here. There we go. That's going to be better. I'll transition over there. Okay, so the first thing you're probably asking yourself is, well, Fred, if we don't have death saving throws, what happens when they reach 0 hit points? Well, they die. That's it. It's really simple. So we don't have to worry about instant death because you don't have to get minus your maximum hit points. So that doesn't come into play. Does that mean that, I mean, ultimately, we could say, well, if we reach 0 hit points, does it mean we were stable? Well, you could decide that could be part of it. There's a couple of ways you can do it. You could just say when you reach 0 hit points, there's no death saving throws and you're dead. Or you could say when we reach 0 hit points, you are not dead, but you are stable and not bleeding out. Which means the only way to get them back up would be, if you wanted to, is to wait 1d4 hours. So you roll a 4-sided dice and you wait that long for them to recover. And then once you've done that, you're like, okay, cool. You won't need to worry about using stabilization. It means your health, it's not your medical kit, your healer's kit won't really have a play in the game. It won't be necessary. It will mean that something like Spare the Dying really will have no part in the game. It won't mean anything. You will just the spell just disappears, just like that. It means that if you do cast healing magic, you can get a character who's on 0 hit points back up. But then again, it also means potentially that if you are on 0 hit points, but you're not dead, but you're just stable, and we don't have any death saving throws, but we're not going to kill the character straight away, Another way of doing it, people, they don't have to just die if they reach 0 hit points. They could be dead at 0 hit points, or they could just be stable. It means that somebody attacks them, we're probably going to say they're dead, because that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? So you can muck around with this thing. Death saving throws are easy to modify, easy to strip out, and easy to change with 5e. It is, as if anything, it really should exist as a variant rule. If it existed as a variant rule, I feel like those people who like a deadly game would get their deadly game, and those people who don't want a deadly game would have a non-deadly game, because they would have death saving throws. Okay, so you can do it, and it's not hard. Frankly, I think my group will be eliminating death saving throws from our next game that we play in the future. Anyway, now have I gone through all the questions? Yeah, I honestly, I think it's probably more fun for the dungeon master when players go down is to have them captured and get interrogated. Do you know I ran an interrogation with a group of players one time, and I thought it would be really interesting and fun, and I would be able to put the squeeze on them and all the rest. And my players had decided, well, we've all been captured, we're all being interrogated and tortured, and they were like, just bring it on, we don't care. And I'm like, I was not what I was expecting. So you got to be careful when you think that you capturing the players' characters and having a torture scene winds up not being a insensitive, bad taste scene. It winds up turning into potentially a comical relief scene, because your players can call you on your bluff, because they're already decided at this point, because that's what happened to me, and it may well happen to you. They had already decided at this point, okay, so Fred, we had a TPK, but you decided we're all captured, and now we're being interrogated. Each one of them was trying to outdo the other person as they're being interrogated, because of course the entire group can see what's going on. So they would all just up the ante, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And then in the end, they had already said to themselves, and they told me when they'd finished doing this, Fred, you'd essentially taken us out. You gave us an extra chance, so we decided to just milk it for all it was worth, because we knew that you weren't going to kill us. You would have killed us the first time rather than the second time. So we decided to just milk it for all it was worth. So they did, and it just turned into I guess, the Black Adder. Can you imagine capturing the Black Adder and trying to threaten his life? He's probably just going to insult you. This is exactly what they wound up doing to me. Anyway, right, so I think I've covered pretty much everything I needed to cover today. I don't think there's anything else. I think it's a good point to finish. What I will say about tomorrow. Tomorrow is the feature presentation for those of you who are here. I will be covering Power Game Style, play style, the Power Gamer play style. Now, for those of you who are thinking, is that the same video that I'm going to see that has been on other channels? No, it's not, because I've watched them, and that's not the video I've made. Okay, that's not the material I put together. This is to explain to people who are power gamers their behavior and how they play the game. Okay, it is also there to indicate the aspects of playing that game that are not healthy and the aspects that are healthy. It is also there to give Dungeon Masters advice on how to adjudicate how a power gamer plays in your group. And yeah, that's all it really is. I did a video a long time ago on different play styles. I never went into depth. So I have taken a lot of resources that do in fact exist in pages and on the internet, but mostly in pages of books. And I've put it together, plus a lot of my own experience. And we'll see. If this does all right and people like it, then I will consider covering all of the other play styles. And I can assure you that the Power Gamer is not the worst play style or the best play style. Okay, it is just a play style. I'm going to make a new character soon, and I'm going to make a little bullet point that if they are interrogated, they are going to try to interrogate the interrogator. Yeah, yeah, that's the way. There you go. Yeah, that'll cause some interesting things for your dungeon master. Okay, all right. So I just want to say thank you to my patrons who support me every month to make this sort of content. I don't even want to call it content. I just want to say this is like a learning tutorial. This is a classroom. This is what it was. That's exactly what it's supposed to be. Slides, demonstration, explanation. Okay, it's basically a classroom, and every week we do this same time, same day. Next week it'll be magic. We'll cover some magic. So thanks to my patrons. The best way to support me is on Patreon, rather than super chats and super stickers or any other thing. That's the best place to go. So thank you to everybody who's been part of the live stream and asked me questions and given me feedback and answered the poll. Thank you very much for taking part in that and for watching the live stream or rewatching the live stream. If you're rewatching the live stream, thank you for doing that. And watching all of the edited videos that I have coming out and the shorts videos. Yes, you will see more of AJ Pickett, Mr. X, and various other people since I have far too many videos waiting to be edited in the background. They are coming. It's just going to take me a very long time. And wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, or the night, or the wee early morning, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.